meanwhile, I will show you the previous problem answers, right? So you can cross check. Uh, right. So if you can see here, you can find the answers for it. So for this problem, that is for the first problem, the turnaround time is, average turnaround time is 113 and average waiting time is 72. So if you got the same answers, then you are correct. How many of you got the same answers? 113 and 72 for the first problem. If you want, you can cross check the answer. Yes, very good, ma. 79. Yes, most of you got the same answers, right? Okay, very good, very good. Right. So for the second problem, I will show you the answers. That also you can cross check. Yes. See, for time quantum 3, 31.4 and 23.2. For time quantum 3, if you see, the answers are this, 31.4 and 23.2. You got the same? For the second problem, for the time quantum equal to 3, 31.4 and 23.2. Yes? 32.6. For the first one, for the time quantum equal to 3, for time quantum 4, you got 32.6, not 36.6. Okay, for time quantum 3, you got the same answers. You please respond to that first. Or else, Jahnavi got some answers. Okay, so if you are getting different answers, I will solve quickly in 5 minutes. So please post your answers, the remaining for time quantum 3 as well for time quantum 4. You post your answers. Actually, yesterday your G section students solved those problems and most of them got those answers. Third one is 9. It is absolutely correct. Turnaround time for process A is 9. Guys, please respond 31.4 and 26. You got 31.4 correct and 26 you got 32.6. Okay, maybe. Time quantum 4, 32.6, 24.4. Maybe your answer is correct. Time quantum 3, you got 31.2 and 25. Okay. Okay, I am solving this. Please quickly, you please check the answers now. Someone on your mic can tell me the question quickly for time quantum second one. For time quantum 3, I am doing. Chapanamma, how many processes are there? Someone on your mic can tell me because I can't open the previous slide now.
Ma'am, 5 process.
5 process. You tell me the burst time and the arrival times.
Burst time is 10, 6, 12, 8, 5.
10,
6,
6,
12, 8,
12,
5.
8, 5. Arrival times?
0, 0, 2, 1, 3.
2, 1, 3.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so please check for the time quantum 3 I am doing. At the time of arrival time 0, P1 and P2 both arrived. P1 arrived and P2 the next arrived. So P1 will take the CPU and at the time of 3 it is coming out, right? So by the time of 3, the processes that are arrived are P4, then P2 and P5. P5 also arrived by 3, right? Now P1 will be taken out and P1 will be added at the end of the queue. Then P1 is left with how much time? 7. Next P2 will get the chance. So P2 will be now left with 3. Then P2 is added at the end of the queue. Then P4 will be given. P4 will be executed for 3, remained with 5. Then P4 will be added at the end of the queue. Then is this P3? No, I'm sorry, this is P2 or the P3. Next P3 will get the chance. How much time P3 requires? 12. So among 3 will be done. So P3 is added here. Now who will get the chance? P5 will get the chance. So now P5 will be left with 2, 15. Next who will get the chance? P1. So P1 18, 4. Then P2, P1 will be added here. Then P2 will come out at 21. So it is left with 0. So P1 process is completed now. Now P4 will get the chance. P4 now left with 2 will be added at the end here, 24. Then after P4, I missed something. P5 should come now. P5 should get added. I missed somewhere. Can you please tell me the ready queue? Wait. P2 P1 before P5, no? P5 is completed at P3 తర్వాత ఇక్కడ P5 ఉండాలి. I'm sorry. Then after P4, P3 will get the chance. Am I correct? P4, P3, P5. P4. Guys, I am doing it again. I'm sorry. Zero, P1, P2, right? So then by the time of 3, the process arrived are P4, P3, P5. Then P2, P1 got executed now. P1 added at the end here. Then P2 will be taken. So now P2 will be left with 3, 6. So P2 added here. Then P4 will get executed for 3. P4 added here. Then P3 will get executed for this. P3 added here. Then P5 will get executed for 3, then added here. Then P1 will get executed for 3, then P1 added here. Then P2 got executed for 3. It will be done now. 21. Then P4. So P4 will get executed for 3, then 24, then P3 added here. P3 will get executed for this. Now P3 is left with 6. Then P5 is having only 2. So at 29 it will come out. right? So P5 is done. Next P1. P1 will be left with 1, 32. So P1 added here. Then P4 is left with only 2. So at 34 it will be coming out. Then P3 left with 6. So now it will be remained with 3. Then 37. Then P1 will take only 1. Then P3 will be executed, right? 39, 42. You got the same? Yes. Okay. Let me now calculate the turnaround times. For P1 completed at 38 plus P2 completed at 21. P3 completed at 42 minus 2 is the arrival time, so 40. P4 completed at 34, so arrival time 1, 33. Then P5 completed at 29, so arrival time is 3, so 26. So you add this 38, 39, 40, 42, 72, 92, 98, 98 plus 60, 158 by 5. $31.6. Ma'am, after 38, we have to get 41. This one, for P2 process ended at 21 only, no?
My class after P1 38.
After P1 at the end, that is P3, no? Yes, for P3 it is 43, 42. Arrival time is 2, no? So it will be 40.
Ma'am, PQ is 3, no, ma'am. From 38 to 41. Not 42.
I'm not getting you guys. Someone tell me clearly.
Ma'am, in the chart, after P1 to P3, 38 to 41, ma'am. That's not 43.
38, 41. Okay.
Yes.
So 38 plus 3, no? Okay. So it will be 39. You mean to say this? 41 minus 2 is the arrival time, no? 39. Yes, ma, yes or no? So
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
it will be 7. So it will be 4. That's all? $157. So 31.4. Yes? Is my answer is correct? Yes, 31.4. Now calculate the waiting time. Waiting times will be like 38 minus 10, 28 plus, we'll do one thing, very simple, 157 minus, we'll do this, 20, 30, 41. So 6, 1, 1 by 5. So 2, 23.2. No? Okay, I'll do here only. 38 minus 10, 28 plus 21 minus 3. How much? 18 plus 39 minus 12, 27. Plus, yes, I am rounding off, plus 33 minus 8, 25 plus 21. So, 28 plus 18 plus 27 plus 25 plus 21. Someone add and tell me this. Let me, where I will find the calculator. So 28 plus 18 plus 27 plus 25 plus 21 divided by 5. 23.8. 23.2. Why I got 23. Guys, here I got 23.2 only, but you are having some doubt, so I solved again. Which one is correct now? 38 minus 10, 28, 21 minus 3, 18, 39 minus 12, 27, 33 minus 8, 25, then 26 minus 5, 21. $23.2 is correct answer, I guess. Why you are getting 24.4? And here again I am getting some other answer, guys.
Ma'am, there you did mistake. For
Where?
P2 it is 15, ma'am.
For P2,
It is 15. 21 minus 6, 15. You wrote 18.
20 minus 7. This one should be 15, huh?
Yes, ma'am.
Then how much it will be like?
23.2 it will be, ma'am.
Yes, 23.2 I already got here, ma. This is the correct answer, right? You will get 116 by 5, 23.2. But someone are getting 24 something, no? 24.4. Guys, this is the correct answer. Please cross check your answers. You should get 23.2. See, I have taken this total turnaround time minus total burst time. So I got this as 116 by 5, 23.2. Jahnavi? Yeah, okay, no problem. So 23.2 you should get. Right? So 31.4 and 23.2. 31.4. 31.4 and 23.2. These are the correct answers only, no? The answers which I gave you first. Now time quantum 4 we will solve. Let me do it fast. I'm so sorry guys. Today I'm making so many mistakes. So for time quantum equal to 4. P1, P2, P3, P4, P5. So 0, 0, 2, 1, 3. This I remember. These are the arrival time. Burst time step and fast ga. Someone tell me the burst
10,
time.
6, 12, 8, 5.
10, 6, 12, 8, 5. Is my arrival times are correct?
Yes, ma'am, yes.
So we'll do it fast. So P1, 6, 4, P1, P2, by the time of 4, already which P4, P3, P5 are arrived. Then P1 will come. Then P2, 8, it left with 6, it left with 2. Then P4, P4 will get executed for 4, 12. Then P3 will executed for 4, we're left with 8. Then P5 we're left with 1. Then again P1 will get the chance. P1 will get executed for 4, left with 2. Then P2 will get executed only for 2. P2 is completed. P4 will execute for 4. It's terminated. Then P3, 34, 4 will be added here. Then P5 will get executed for 1. P5 is over. Then P1 will execute for 2. Then P3 will execute for 4. 41. Is that correct? So I'm calculating the turnaround times quickly. 37, 26, 39, 29, 39. For P4, 30 minus 1. For P5, 35 minus 3, 32. $32.6. $32.6, 24.4. Yes, 32.6, 24.4. Yes, ma. This is 32, right? This is the answers. Okay, done. So next to move to the next topic, ma. We already wasted so much time. Yes. Yes. We are done with the scheduling algorithms, right? Yeah. So next we have this multi-level queue. Please concentrate, stop the problems, right? We are done with the problems now. Next, move to the next topic. That is multi-level queue scheduling. You can call it as MLQ. Multi-level queue scheduling. Put the subheading as multi-level queue scheduling. Why so many people are not switching on the camera still? How many times should I tell you, ma? I will take the attendance now. Shall I? మళ్ళీ వెళ్ళిపోతారు అంతేనా? Yes. So multi-level queue scheduling, ma. So in multi-level queue scheduling, please concentrate, right? So in this multi-level queue scheduling algorithm, here the processes are classified into different groups, right? Here the processes are classified into different groups. So when a process is arriving, based on the group, we will send the process into that queue. So here instead of one ready queue, we will have multiple ready queues. And here each queue has its own scheduling. So one queue may be high priority like that. You are getting me? Right? So here the ready queue is partitioned into separate queues, right? You can make them as foreground and background. So here like that, we will have different queues. We'll see in detail about the queues in the next slide. So here a multi-level queue scheduling partitions the ready queue into several separate queues. You are getting me? Instead of one ready queue, here we will have several queues based on the memory size, process priority, or process type. You are getting me? So based on your process, based on the memory it requires, or based on the process priority, or based on the process type, right? For that process, right, a queue is assigned. So whenever that process comes into the CPU, whenever that process wants to get executed, so that will be moved to the CPU ready queue according to the classification, right? So here remember, as I told you, the foreground and background. Here always remember the foreground processes have the highest priority over the background processes. Remember, the foreground processes will be having the highest priority over the background processes, right? If you see here, right. So normally here 5 queues are used in the multi-level queue scheduling, right? We will be using 5 queues, and we categorize the processes according to their priorities as system processes. So here the system processes will be getting the highest priority, right? Because these are the foreground process. So these are directly connected to the CPU. So the processes from the system processes, that is from the foreground queue, will be given to the CPU first. So when this becomes empty, then it will go to the down level queue. So that is interactive processes, right? The interactive processes will be kept in the down level to the system processes. Then once the system processes are over, the interactive processes will get the chance to use the CPU, right? Then down to those, we have interactive editing processes. So this interactive editing processes are having the low priority than the interactive process. So once the interactive processes completes, then only this interactive editing processes will get the chance. Then batch process. So these batch process will get the chance once the interactive editing processes are completed, right? So once the batch process completed, then student process will get the chance, right? So you are getting me? It is very simple, ma. Here what we do is, instead of having one ready queue, we have multiple ready queues, and those ready queues are kept in such a way that according to their priorities, right? The queues are kept in that way. That is the foreground and the background. The foreground will be having the highest priority processes, right? Those will get the first chance to use the CPU, right? You are getting me now? Right? Yes or no? So here, if you take each queue has absolute priority over the lower priority queues. So each process will have the highest priority compared to its low priority queues, right? And one more thing, no low level queue processes will start execution until unless all the process in the high level queue are empty. So that means until students interactive editing and batch process completes, the student processes will not get the chance, right? And when the low level processes are getting executed and a high level process enters, your low level process will be printed from the CPU and the high level process will be getting the chance, right? For example, let's consider if the batch process is running and the system process arrived. Your batch process will be printed and CPU will be given to the system processes. So what is the disadvantage with this? Can anyone tell me? You are understanding? You understood what is multi-level queuing? Yes, no? Instead of one ready queue, we have multiple ready queues, right? And multiple ready queues among, we have foreground and background things. Foregrounds have the highest priority, backgrounds will have low level priority, right? And how we categorize the processes when a process arrives, right? To which queue the process has to be given according to their memory size, according to the priority, and according to the process type, we will select to which queue the process has to be given, right? So in this example, I have shown you like there are 5 types of processes. For each type of process, we have a queue, right? So here 2 points you should remember. Until unless the foreground process completes, the low level will not get the chance. And when the low level is getting executed and the high level process arrives, right? When the high level process arrives, then what happens? You have to tell me. When the low level process is getting executed and the high level process arrives. Yes, your low level process will be preempted and high level process will get the chance, right? Now you tell me what are the disadvantages with this multi-level queuing? Yes, the least priority queue may not be executed. That means it is a kind of starvation problem. Starvation of low level queue, right? So here the processes are permanently assigned to a queue when they enter the system and processes are not allowed to move from one queue to other queue. Yes or no? Right? When the process are, see, when a process arrives and we always assign the same queue for that kind of process. Yes or no? Based on the process type and the memory it requires, based on those things, right? So we assign a queue for that. And here, once a queue is assigned to the process is not allowed to move between the queues. That means when a process is allowed to the low level queue, always will be there in the low level only. Always will be there in the low level only, right? And what I told you, there is a chance that low level processes will be facing the problem of starvation, because unless the higher priority level queues are empty, no low level queues will be executing. Yes or no? Right? All high level queues has to be completed to get the chance for the low level queues processes. Student process will get the chance only when all the above queues are empty. When it will happen? Some or the other process will be entering with the high priority. So the low level processes will always be waiting for the CPU. So that is the reason I am telling you that they will be facing this starvation problem, right? So if any, one more point is there. if at any instance of time, if there is a process in high priority queue, right, then there is no chance that low level processes can be executed eternally. That is what, right? In the high level queues, some or the other process will be there all the time. So the low level things will never get the chance. So that is the problem with the multi-level queuing. So to avoid this problem, right, we have multi-level feedback queue scheduling. We have multi-level feedback queue scheduling. The next scheduling algorithm is multi-level feedback queue, right, scheduling, right? So in this, a process can move between the various queues. That means aging can be implemented this way. So we can overcome the problem of multi-level queue scheduling by using this multi-level feedback queue scheduling. So this is the diagram for this multi-level queue feedback, right? So your processes will be moving between the queues. So if the last queue job is waiting for more amount of time, after certain amount of time, it will be moved to the middle queue. Then after some time, it will be moved to the first queue. That way, the process will be moving between the queues so that you can avoid this problem of starvation, right? Right. So multi-level feedback queue scheduling allows a process to move between the queues, right? So here the processes are separated according to the characteristics of their CPU burst. Here, how you are going to categorize the processes is processes are separated according to the characteristics of their CPU burst. That means how much time they are spending on the CPU based on the time, right? The processes will be categorized, right? So if a process uses too much of CPU time, it will be moved to the low priority queue. You are getting me? If a process is using so much of CPU time, then that will be moved to the lower level, low priority queues, right? And if a process that waits too long in a lower priority queue, it will be moved to the high priority queue. So in this form, you can going to avoid the starvation problem. You're getting me, right? So you are categorizing the processes according to the CPU burst, and in between, when a process is taking too much of CPU time, then it will be moved to the down level queues, right? And if a process is waiting for long amount of time, then that will be moved to the high priority queues, right? So here you consider this example, right? So here I am considering a multi-level feedback queue scheduler with 3 queues. I am calling them as Q0, Q1 and Q2, right? Here the CPU first will execute the processes from Q0, then it will execute the process in Q1, then it will move to the Q2, right? So only when Q0 and Q1 are empty, the scheduler will execute the processes in Q2. The same thing. How it will get executed is same. First the top level queue will be executed. Once that becomes empty, then only it will come to the down. Then only it empty, it will go to the down. That way it is going to do it, right? So a process that arrives for Q1 will preempt a process in Q2. The same thing. When a process of this Q2 is getting executed and a process of Q1 arrives, your Q2 will be preempted and Q1 will get the chance, right? And here I have given some considerations. As I told you, depending on some characteristics of CPU burst, the processes will be given the queues, right? So here how I am giving the queues is, a process entering the ready queue right? The process entering the ready queue, first it will put in the Q0, right? And for that process, a time quantum of 8 will be given initially. When a process is entering, first it will be given to Q0 and time quantum will be assigned as 8, right? And then within the time quantum 8, if the process is unable to complete, if the process is not getting executed within the time, then it will be added at the end of the Q1. Please understand, try to understand this. Initially, when a process is entering, that will be added in the Q0, right? Q0. And for that process, the time quantum 8 will be assigned. With this 8, the process will enter to the CPU. And within this time quantum 8, if the process could able to complete its job, it will be terminated. But if it is not completed within this time, then what happens is that will be added to Q1. It will be added at the end of the Q1 and will be assigned the time quantum 16. Will be assigned the time quantum 16, right? And it will get the chance. Next, it will get the chance of CPU. And within the 16 time, if the process completes, it will get terminated, not a problem. Within the 16 also, if the process is unable to complete, then it will be added to the third queue, that is Q2. So in this Q2, you will be using the first come, first serve scheduling. We will be using this first come, first serve. So if you can see here, so we will be using the 3 queues. So how the 3 queues will be executing is, the first queue will be using the round robin scheduling with time quantum 8. The Q1 will be using the round robin with time quantum 16. And the third queue will be using the first come, first serve. Right? Now, so the processes in the Q2 are run on FCFS basis, but are run only when Q0 and Q1 are empty. Right? Yes or no? So that means what I'm going to tell you here is, this scheduling algorithm gives the highest priority to any process within the CPU burst of 8 milliseconds or less. So which are the processes having the burst time below 8 will be getting the highest priority. They will be executing first, right? Such process will get the CPU time and they will execute the processes very quickly and it will go to the next process like that, right? You're getting me? Then the processes more than 8 and less than 16, right? The process which requires more than 8 and less than 16 will be getting the next priority. They will also will be getting the chance more quickly only. Why? Because with the time quantum 8 means all are small process only. They will be executing very fast and then they will move to the second queue, right? There it should be above 8 and below 16. They will also will be served very fastly, right? But above 16, the process which are having the time quantum of above 16 will be in the last queue. There they will be served with FCFS. That means the large processes will be they has to wait for the large amount of time to get the CPU. Yes or no? Right? That means I can say a multi-level feedback queue scheduler is defined by the set of parameters. What are those? It will be defined by the number of queues. If you can read that second point, here I can say the multi-level feedback queue scheduler defined by the following parameters. They are the number of queues, the scheduling algorithm for each queue, and the method used to determine when to upgrade a process. And that means I told you, no, when it is waiting for large amount of time, will be moved to the higher queues. That means what is the method we are using to determine when to upgrade a process, and method used to determine when to demote a process. That means from the high level to the low level, a process will be moved, right? When to move that, and method used to determine which queue a process will enter when that process needs a service. So here, these are the 5 parameters, right, which will define your multi-level feedback queue, right? So now you understand both multi-level and multi-level feedback. Any doubts in those two topics? Clear for you all? Initially, no. What is your doubt? Ma'am, in FCFS, burst time. See, ma'am, FCFS means the process which are having the burst time above 16 will be moved to the third queue. That means the parameters also we can define according to your implementation. So in that example, I have taken as 8 to 16. Not only that, you can put some other values based on your type of the system. 61 clear? Okay, ma. So next you have is spreading thing I can explain later when we are yes, multi-process scheduling, right? So what do you mean by this multi-process scheduling? Multi-processor scheduling means if you are having more than one processor in your system, if you have more than one process in your system, how the scheduling can be done, right? When you have more than one process in your system, how it can be done. See, CPU scheduling is more complex when multiple CPUs are available. Yes or no? When you are having 2 processes, let's consider in your system, and your job, if it is executing half in one processor and another half in another processor, it is very difficult to manage those processes. But now we will learn how the scheduling can be taken care in the multi-processor systems, right? So this scheduling is complex, I can say, in the multi-processor systems, right? Once again, yes. So in the multiprocessor systems, we can use any available processor to run any process in the queue. How we can do is, right? We can use any available processor to run any process in the queue, right? So what we are going to do is, whenever any process comes, so we will see which processor is empty, which processor is idle, and accordingly we will assign the jobs to the processes, right? So when it is coming to the multiprocessor scheduling approaches, when it is coming to the multiprocessor scheduling approaches, we have 2 approaches for multiprocessing. The first one is asymmetric multiprocessing and symmetric multiprocessing. This one we already discussed when we are discussing about the multiprocessor systems, right? So what do you mean by asymmetric? In the asymmetric, we have a boss and slave kind of thing, right? A boss will be monitoring all the slaves, right? You are getting this point? We already discussed this, symmetric and asymmetric. You are trying to recollect that? Yes. Right? So in asymmetric, master and worker, right? Master and worker relationship exists there. So the master server is the single processor that handles the activities related to all scheduling decisions. Here, master only will take the all scheduling decisions and IO processing and other system activities. right? And the remaining processors execute only user code. So they will be executing only the user code, but only the master will be doing the activities like scheduling decisions. That means which process has to be given to which processor, right? And IO processing, when a process requires IO, this handling of IO also will be taken care by the master only, right? Only one processor accesses the system data structures, right? Alleviating the needs of the data sharing, right? So here only the master will be having all the decisions taken, right? With this, I can say asymmetric multiprocessing is simple because only one processor accesses the system data structures and reducing the need for the data sharing. It will reduce the need for the data sharing. Why? Because not all the processes are having the memory sharing. They are not having the access to the memory. Why? Because allocating the memory, everything will be taken care only by the master. So that is the reason I can say asymmetric is simple. But when it is coming to the symmetric, each processor is self-scheduling. Here, each processor is self-scheduling. So all processes in common ready queue, or each has its own private queue or ready processes. So here, all processes can share a common ready queue. They can do like that, or else they can have their own private queues also, right? So when they have their private queues, when the processes that are assigned to that particular processor will be holded in their private queues, right? All process may be, right? Scheduling processes, right? How your scheduling can take place is, we'll have a scheduler for each processor which examines the ready queue and select a process to execute. So here, if they are having their own private queues, those many schedulers will be implemented. So what is the job of their schedulers? Whenever a job comes to that processor, right, from that ready queue, the job will be kept in the processor. So who is going to do that? The scheduler, right? But when the problem comes here is, when multiple processes are trying to access and update a common data. See, multiple processes are executing multiple jobs, but and consider two or more jobs are referring to the same memory location, right? They are access or update a common data structure. Here we have to program the scheduler carefully that there won't be any problem with the common data sharing, right? When two or more processes are referring to the same memory location, right? That means they all want to read the same data at a time. So at the time, the scheduler has to be designed, or it has to be programmed very carefully that there won't be any conflict, right? There won't be any conflict, right? So that means what? We have to program it very carefully that two separate processes do not choose to schedule the same process, and that process are not lost from the queue. So, and one more point you should remember here is, right, two separate processors do not choose to schedule the same process. So when two processes are trying to schedule single process, then that process, what happens with that? They both will take the process out, nor they execute, and your process will be lost, right? It should not happen like that. You have to be, when you are using this multi-process scheduling and with the symmetric multiprocessing, we have to be careful that not more than one process should refer to same location, and not more than one processor should choose a single process. When it will, when this problem will come, when all the processes are sharing the same ready queue. In this case, the problem comes that two processors are trying to take the single process, take the same process from the ready queue, then the problem arises, right? So we have to be careful in these two things. What are those? No two processors can schedule one process at a time, and The second one is no two processes can refer to the same memory location, or they will be referring to same data structures, right? So that is the things we should consider, right? And coming to this affinity, the processor affinity. So the process has affinity for processor on which it is currently running. So it can be done in two ways, ma. The processor affinity can be implemented in two ways. One is soft affinity, the second one is hard affinity. I'll tell you what is affinity means. Soft affinity means, right, what it tries to do is, the operating system will attempt to keep a process on a single processor. Right? Soft affinity means whenever a process is coming for the execution, the OS will try to make sure that that entire process is getting executed in a single processor. What is hard affinity? Hard affinity means it will allow a process to specify a subset of processor on which it may run. So processor affinity ante entante process will choose how it should get executed in the processor. Right? A process can choose, right, how it should get executed in the processor. So this soft affinity means here OS will make sure that the entire process will get executed in a single processor. But if possible, it will also allow to migrate also. That means it will execute that process in a processor for some time, and then it can migrate to the other process also. But mostly it tries to execute the entire process in a single processor. That is called soft affinity. What is hard affinity means? Here, in the hard affinity, some systems provide the system calls. So here some system calls will be there. What those system calls will help is, it will allow a process to specify a subset of processors on which it may run. So here the process can choose some set of processors on which it can run. That means if one process got interrupted, the process will be migrated to the some other process, and those processes should be in the list of the subset where the process is choosing. You understood this? You should tell me. Symmetric, asymmetric, clear? Then affinity is clear? Yes. Soft affinity and hard affinity. Yes? Now, coming to this. What is NUMA? In the previous classes I told you. Can you tell me? Do you remember? UMA, NUMA. Uniform memory access and non-uniform memory access. గుర్తుందా లేదా? In uniform, to refer to any memory location, it will take equal amount of time. In NUMA, NUMA, for different memory locations, it will take different amount of times. Yes, okay. So it is showing you that NUMA and CPU scheduling, right? So non-uniform, as I told you, no. So here non-uniform means what is the memory within that it will take fast access, it will take less time. But if it wants to take the memory location of the some other area, right? Some other processor, right? Which then it will take more amount of time. That is slow access, right? So it is just showing you the how this NUMA and CPU scheduling will take, right? Now, one more point we should consider in this multiprocessor scheduling is that is load balancing. Right? One more point we should consider here is load balancing. So what do you mean by load balancing is the load balancing attempts to keep the workload evenly distributed across all the processors in an SMP system. Right? In the symmetric multiprocessor systems, what load balancing will do is this load balancing will attempt to keep the workload evenly distributed across all the processes. So this will make sure that no CPU is overburdened and no CPU is idle. Its motto is no CPU should be overburdened and no CPU should be idle. So it will make sure that all the processors will get the equal amount of workload, right? So this load balancing necessary only on systems where each processor has its own private queue. So where it is most required is when they have their private queues, right? So for this load balancing, it is using two approaches. One is push migration and pull migration. It is using two approaches for load balancing, push migration and pull migration. So in this push migration, a specific processor periodically checks the load on each processor. So if it finds that there is an imbalance, right, then it will evenly distribute the workload by moving the process from the overloaded processor to idle or less busy processors. So in this push migration, what happens is one processor will be observing all the processor's workload. So if it found some imbalancing, then what it will do is it will take some jobs from the high burden processor, right? It will take from the overloaded or high burden overloaded processor, and it will give the jobs to the less busy processor or idle processor. That is called push migration. What do you mean by pull migration? Pull migration, when it will happen is, what it is in this pull migration, an idle process itself, it will pulls a waiting process from a busy processor. So there is a processor which is very busily running the jobs, and in that ready queue, there some processes are waiting. So in that case, the idle processor, what it will do is it will take some jobs from the busy processor queue and it will execute. So that is called pull migration. Understood? Load balancing can be done in two ways. What are those? What do you mean by load balancing? 7G? Chepama? Roll number 7G. Is there? Roll number 7G. What happened? Left arm? 7G. Is there? Can you please respond? Roll number 57G. 7H. Systems on just jump up. Shall I take the attendance now? Wait. I will call the attendance now. Mic on just Chapali, camera mic. Who are not respond, we completed first come first serve, SJF, priority round robin, multi-level queuing and multi-level feedback queuing, and we also completed multi-processor scheduling, right? So in the multi-processor scheduling, what happens? we discussed like it is very difficult to schedule in the multiprocessor. So in the multiprocessor, how it can be done? They can share a common queue, or else they can have their own private queues, right? Push migration, right? So in push migration, what happens is, it is not there in the slide, no? Let me check if it is there. Right. In the push migration, what happens is very simple. A processor will be there that will be monitoring all the processor's workload, right? And if it finds some imbalancing, it finds some imbalancing, then what it will do is it will take some jobs from the overloaded processors and it will assign those jobs to the low loaded, right? Low loaded or idle processors. That's all. That is push migration. Pull means what is? In pull migration, the idle job, it voluntarily will pull some jobs from the busy processor. From the overloaded processor, it will take some jobs and it will execute in their own. Is it clear? 7D push migration means, right? Yeah. So this is all about this multi-processor scheduling. So in the multi-processor scheduling, like this, it is very complex, I can say. Here we will discuss about what happens in the asymmetric multiprocessing, how the scheduling can be taken care, and in symmetric, how it can be done, right? So in asymmetric, it is very simple, ma. Why? Because only one processor will be controlling all the other processes. So assigning of the jobs and referring to the memory, everything will be handled by a single processor. So it is very easy. But when it is coming to symmetric, here two things can be possible. They can share a common ready queue or they can have their own private queues. But when they are sharing the common ready queues, they has to be careful that two processes are trying to take a single process for the execution, right? And when they are having their own private queues, we have to be careful that the two processors should not be referring to the same memory location. And here the affinity, how this affinity can be done is soft affinity, hard affinity. In the soft affinity, the OS will make sure that your entire process execution will be done in the single processor. But sometimes, if possible, it can do migration also. In the hard affinity, a process can choose that in which processors it wants to get executed. That means it can choose a subset of the processors where it can do its execution part, right? So that is about the soft affinity and hard affinity. It is clear for you all, everything, right? Done? Yes. Let's move to the next topic, that is threads. Right. So coming to this threads, Seema, attendance, can I only 42 members got present according to your responses? Yeah, threads are lightweight process, very good. Yes, first answer to my thing. Only 42 are present according to this. So you want me to update the same, or anyone wants to respond with their attendance? No one? Once again, I am reading the absentees. 62 is there? Please respond if any one of the roll numbers are there and not get the attendance. 62, 65, 60. So I can say a thread is a lightweight process. You all know that, right? So the main objectives in this chapter is to introduce the notion of a thread, right? Then multi-threads we will discuss, right? And we examine some issues related to the multi-thread programming. But we are not going in depth, ma. The basic things which are required for you will be discussing in this chapter now, right? So I can say a thread is a basic unit of CPU. So listen carefully, right? I can say a thread is a lightweight process, or I can say a thread is a basic unit of CPU utilization. In technical terms, I can say a thread is a basic unit of CPU utilization, right? And a thread consisting of a thread ID, a program counter, a register set, and a stack. If you take any thread, it is given with a thread ID to identify the thread, just like your process IDs to identify the processes. Here, a thread is also have a thread ID, right? Thread ID, a program counter, right? Program counter will have, which will have the next instruction address like, and the register sets, the registers required for the execution, and a stack, right? And a thread is sharing the code, data, and the files in common. I can say a thread shares with the other threads belonging to the same process. So if a process is having 4 threads or 3 threads, let's consider, right? Let's consider a process is divided into 3 threads. A process is having 3 threads. At the time, a thread shares its code section and the data section and the files is nothing but the operating system resources. It will be sharing them in common with the other threads belongs to the same process. Remember, right? What this point says is a thread shares with the other threads belongs to the same process. What it is going to share? It is going to share the program code, data, and the OS resources such as files, right? And if you take a single process, that is a traditional process, you can call it as a heavyweight process. We can call it as a heavyweight process. It has a single thread of control. That means your entire process will be taken as a single thread. That means it will be not divided into smaller units. As a single unit, your entire process is getting done. That will be called heavyweight process. A traditional process is called heavyweight process, which has a single thread of control. Will have only a single thread. If a process has multiple threads of control, right? That means if your process is divided into multiple threads, these multiple threads can perform multiple tasks at a time. These multiple threads can perform multiple tasks at a time, right? They have their own registers and they have their own stack, but they will be sharing the code, data, and files in common. Very simple. If your entire process is getting executed as a single unit, that is called single threaded process. If your process is divided into multiple threads and multiple threads are executing in parallel, they will be doing multiple jobs at a time, then that is called multi-thread process. So this single thread process is called heavyweight process. This multi-thread processes in this, the threads are called lightweight processes, right? This is clear now? But in present days, if you take the most of the operating system kernels are multi-threaded. In today's environment, most of your operating system kernels are multi-threaded. That means several threads operate in the kernel and each thread performs a separate task, right? So kernel will be doing multiple jobs, no, like it will do memory management, it will do process management, it will do device management, or else it will do interrupt handling like that, right? So if it is multi-threaded, if your kernel is multi-threaded, each thread will perform a specific task. So if one thread is doing memory management, the other thread will do device management, the other thread will do process management, and the other thread will handle the interrupts like that, right? So here some examples are given. for the multi-thread concept, how these threads will work, right? See, if you are browsing a web page, right? In that case, one thread will display the images, the other thread will retrieve the data from the network, and one thread will take the commands from the keyboard like that. That way, your threads will be working. So if you take a word processor, one thread may display the graphics, another thread respond to keystroke, and another thread will be performing the spell checking and the grammar checking in the background, right? So these are the examples for multi-threaded processes. If your process is doing as the multi-thread process, this can be done, right? And here, if you take the Solaris operating system, it has a set of threads in the kernel specifically for the interrupt handling. Only for interrupt handling, they have some set of threads in the Solaris operating system. And when you take the Linux operating system, there you have a separate thread for managing the amount of free memory in the system. For managing the free memory, you have a separate thread. So what are the responsibilities of this or benefits of the multi-thread concept, right? Advantages of multi-threads are, I can tell, like responsiveness. Why I'm selling responsiveness is the advantage of multi-threading is, right? Multi-threading even though, see, when your program is divided into threads and that application is an interactive application, let's consider, right? And here your program will be continue running even a part of it is blocked, right? A part of a part of the program is blocked. Still your process will be executing because we are using the threads concept, right? See, your program is divided into multiple threads. In that, a part of the program is busy in doing some task. They are blocked. They are waiting for some IO or something that got blocked. Even though your program will be executing, because some threads are still active. Some threads are still doing their job. So that is the reason I can say the main benefit is responsiveness. Right? Let's consider your program is an interactive program, and in that your half of the program is blocked waiting for some IO or something. Even though your program will be responsive because the other part is executed by a different thread. Clear? Responsiveness. Second, resource sharing. Right? Processes can only share the resources through the shared memory. We all know that, right? And by using the message passing, they will be sharing the resources. But when it is coming to the threads, if you see here, the threads are sharing the data, files, code in common. They are sharing the code, data, and files. Files are nothing but your resources, right? So they are sharing the common resources. Here, you need not to specifically request for the resources using the message passing. This is not the communication between the processes. Here, it is the communication between the threads. And all the threads are sharing the common resources, right? They can easily get the access to the resources, right? Threads share the memory and the resources of the same process, right? So because they are sharing the code data in common, right, several different threads within the same address space can use the resources. So it is very easy. The resource sharing is very easy. That means if the resources are allocated to a single process, here all the threads can share those resources because they are sharing them in common. The third one is economy. Right? Economy means allocating the memory and resources for the process creation is costly. Yes or no? When a process is creating, right, we have to give all the resources to the process. But when you are creating the when you are creating a thread, you need not to specifically share the resources, right? What కోసం మళ్ళీ specific గా resources allocate చేయాల్సిన అవసరం లేదమ్మా. They can use the resources which are allocated to the process. So that is the reason I can say economy. If you are allocating the resources to the process, means all the threads within the process can use the resources. Right? So here they have taken a simple example to explain this benefit. So in Solaris, if you create a new process, right, that is 30 times slower than creating a thread. That means creating a thread is 30 times faster than creating a process. See, when your process is getting executed and some other job has to be done, a process can create a process, but creating a new process is very difficult. Why? Because you have to assign the resources to the newly created process. You have to give a separate resources to the process, but creating a thread is very easy. If you are creating a thread, the thread will be created very fast, and the communication between the threads is very fast, and then you need not to allocate the resources separately. Why? Because they will be sharing the resources of the process. And scalability, right? Why? Because here the threads can be running parallel. The threads can be running in parallel on different processing cores. So even though you have a single processor and that processor is having multiple cores, if you are using the multi-threading concept, multiple threads can get executed in multi-cores parallelly. So if you are using in multi-processor environment, it will be more greater. It will give you more scalability. Why? Because in each processor, multiple threads can be executing in parallel, and they will be means. See here, your process execution takes more time than the thread execution. If you divide your process into threads and if you get execute, it takes very less amount of time to execute your process than you are executing a traditional process. So these are the benefits of your thread. Right? You are getting me? Yes. Advantages of the threads, right? So the first one is responsiveness. Why I am telling it is more responsive is even though if half of your process is blocked, the other half will respond because we are using the threads, right? The other threads will be respond. Why? Because the different threads can execute in parallel at a time. Even though half of your process is blocked, the half will get response. Resource sharing, because the threads, multiple threads are sharing the resources in common of a process, right? Here, the resource sharing is easy. Then economy, because they are sharing the common resources, you need not to allocate a separate resource for the threads, right? If you are creating a new process, you are supposed to allocate the resources to the process. But if you are creating a thread, you need not to allocate a specific resources to them. They can share the resources of a process. That is economy. Scalability means because the threads can run in parallel, right? Your scalability will be increased. Even though if it is a single processor, multi-cores will be running in parallel. Multiple threads can run in multi-core. If you are using multi-processor, it is more beneficial. Multiple threads can run in multi-processors, right? Here the thread execution is very, very fast because the communication between the threads is very fast than the communication between the processes, right? So those are the advantages of the threads, right? So what is the need for multi-threading? What is the need for multi-threading? So for this, they have taken a simple scenario to explain you why you need multi-threading is. Consider a scenario where you have a web server, you have a web server, and it will accept the client request for the web pages, images, sound, etc. Right? And you all know that the web server will be always busy with the thousands of client requests, right? Right? And if the web browser, it is running a traditional single thread process, if it is not having the threads concept, if it is having only the process, right? Single thread process, traditional processing if it is using, right? Because it is having only single processor, right? So it can serve only one client request at a time. Yes or no? It can um, serve only one client request at a time, right? And at the time, all the remaining client requests will be waiting. They will wait long amount of time. For this, the solution is if the server is using the multi-threading concept instead of a single process, right? Instead of as a single threaded process, if it is using multi-threading, it can generate multiple threads for each client request. If a client is requested, a thread will be generated and that thread will be serving the client request. That way, if n number of client requests comes also, n threads will be parallelly serving the client request. So that is the advantage of having the multi-threading concept. You understood? Right? Take a simple scenario where we are using the client server thing. We have a server. Take as server is using a single threaded concept, that is, it is having it is running as a single process, or else it is using as the multi-threaded process, right? If it is running as the single threaded process, at a time it can serve only one client request. The remaining all the clients has to wait. If it is running as the multi-thread concept, for each client request a thread is created. That way, n number of threads are generated for n request, right? That way, your all jobs, your all client request will be served with the different threads at a time. So that is the advantage of having the multi-threaded concept, right? Next, coming to this types of threads. Sorry. Here they have given some points here. Multi-core systems putting pressure on programmers challenges include these things. But if you are if you are using the multi-thread concept, right? So each thread will be running in a different core, right? So this thing will be taken care by the threads easily. So that part we are seeing. This is the thing. If you have a single core, all the jobs has to get executed in a single core. But if you have two cores, your jobs will be executed in two cores parallelly, right? And when you are going to this types of threads, so your threads are divided into two types. One is kernel threads, the other one is user threads. Your threads are divided into two types. One is kernel threads and user threads. Make a point of this. One is kernel and user threads. So kernel threads are supported and managed directly by the operating system. If you take the kernel threads, your kernel threads will be directly managed by the operating system. But when it is coming to the user threads, these are supported above the kernel and managed without the kernel support, can be done by the users. Your user threads will be supported above the kernel and managed without the kernel support, right? And coming to this multi-threading models, right? This multi-threading model will tell you the relation between user threads and the kernel threads, right? When you are coming to this multi-threading models, it will tell you the relation between the user threads and the kernel threads. You have three common ways of establishing the relationships. They are many-to-one and one-to-one and many-to-many, right? So if you take many-to-one, this is the diagram, right? So in this many-to-one model, many user level threads to one kernel thread. All these are the user threads. Here many user threads are connected to a single kernel thread, right? So here the thread management can be done by the thread library in the user space. Thread library means this is yes, these are the thread libraries are there. You can see, right? P threads, Win32 threads and Java threads. These are the thread libraries we will use. At the user level, these libraries will be maintained, right? So mainly the thread management is done by the user level threads only, mostly, right? So that is the reason I can say it is efficient, because it can be done in the user space. It won't affect your kernel, right? So because it won't affect your kernel, I am saying it is efficient, right? So the entire process will block if a thread makes a blocking system call. Here the problem is system calls can be done by the kernel, right? Even when any interrupt is generated, the system calls will be done by the kernel. So that is the reason if a system call is generated, your entire process will be blocked, right? And here only one thread can access the kernel at a time. And here multiple threads cannot run parallel on multi-core systems. Why? Because you have only one kernel. At a time, only one user thread can run in the kernel thread. So even though your processor is multi-core processor, you can able to run only one thread at a time. Right? Parallel execution is not possible. So that is the reason only few systems continue to use this model, right? Because of its inability to take the advantage of multiple processing cores. So even though you have multiple cores, you are unable to execute the multiple threads at a time, because only one thread, multiple user threads are connected. So only one thread can run in the kernel at a time. So this is the drawback or limitation with the many-to-one model. Next, you have one-to-one model. So one-to-one model, it maps each user thread to a kernel thread. So if you take like this, one-to-one means one user thread, one kernel thread. So here the limitation or drawback I can say is whenever a user thread is generated, you have to create a separate kernel thread. It will put more burden on the kernel, right? Here, if you take one-to-one model, it provides more concurrency than many-to-one model by allowing another thread to run when a thread makes a blocking system call, because these are separated things. If one thread is making a system call, only this part will be blocked. The remaining will be running in parallel, right? Because they have separate kernels for each user thread. If one is blocking also, the remaining will run parallel. And it also allows the multiple threads to run in parallel on multiple processors. Because you have separate kernels for this, in multi-core system, multiple threads can run in parallel. So the only drawback here is whenever you are creating a user thread, you have to create a corresponding kernel thread. So it will put the burden or overhead on the performance of the application, right? So what they are doing for controlling this burden is your most of the if you are taking this most of the implementations of this model restrict the number of threads supported by the system. So at maximum, how many threads you can generate, that will be limited. It will be controlled. So beyond that limit, you are unable to create the threads to avoid the burden on the kernel. So examples, which operating systems are using this is, your Windows is using this type of model, and Linux is using this type of model, and Solaris 9 and the later versions are using this type of model, one-to-one. Next, you have many-to-many model. Here, you will be having n number of user threads, and you will be having n or less than n kernel threads, right? User threads n unte, kernel threads can be equal to n or less than n in the many-to-many model. So the many-to-many model multiplexes many user threads to a smaller or equal number of kernel threads, right? It will be having smaller or equal number of kernel threads. So the number of kernel threads may be specific to either to a particular application or particular machine. So how many number of kernel threads we should have? It depends on the application, or it depends on the machine, right? And advantages of this many-to-many model are this many-to-many model allows the developer to create as many user threads as they wish. There is no we are not restricting the user threads, right? There is no control over the user threads. User can create any number of user threads he wants, right? And here I cannot say if I created n number of user threads, I can run n jobs parallelly or concurrently. Why? Because here the kernel threads may not be equal to the number of user threads, right? So that point you should remember here, right? If I have n number of user threads, you cannot say that I can run n jobs concurrently. Why? Because you may not have n number of kernel threads here, right? Why? Because a kernel can schedule only one thread at a time. If you have 10 user threads and you have only 4 kernel threads, that means you can run only 4 processes at a time in parallel, because you have only, that means here the concurrency depends on the number of kernel threads. And here the many-to-many model also having some limitations, let's consider there are n threads and you have some few kernel threads. At the time, if a thread is running in a kernel, if a thread running in a kernel got blocked, right? It got blocked. Your process has to be allocated to some other kernel. Why? Because this kernel is blocked. So that we have to be careful when we are using implementing this many-to-many model. Why? Because you have fewer set of kernel threads, and if one kernel got blocked, your process should not get blocked. That process should be allocated to some other kernel here, right? So that is all about your many-to-many model, right? So it is clear for you all about the models, many-to-one, one-to-one, and many-to-many, right? So many-to-one means you have multiple user threads and one kernel thread. One-to-one means for each user thread, one kernel thread is created. Each means here each is having its own advantages and its own disadvantages, right? So many-to-many means for each n number of user threads, you will be having n or less than n kernel threads, right? So actually you have a quiz on threads. Will you take now? I'll give you some time.